What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to episode number 708 of the Smark Moment Smack Talk podcast, Hot Tags of the Week. I'm your host, as always, Tony Mango, flying solo for this edition. I'm going to tell you why straight out of the gate here is because I completely forgot that SmackDown would be at a different time for this week. I'm not used to the whole idea of Netflix airing that stuff when they do that, in advance. And thankfully, thankfully and not thankfully at the same time, I couldn't go to sleep, couldn't fall asleep, I should say. And at around 8 a.m, I got a message from Rob being like, "Oh, remember, it's at 1 o'clock." And I was like, "Oh, well, I don't remember." So that completely changed the whole dynamic. I tried to get some sleep. I got a half hour's worth of sleep. So you were getting me exhausted after SmackDown and exhausted from only a half hour's sleep. But I promise I'm not going to fall asleep on this podcast. And hopefully you won't either. Hopefully you enjoy yourself. Let me know if you do in the comment section below. And if you don't, let me know that too. Perfectly fine. And we are still going to run down all these topics, but since we are recording after SmackDown now, it's a little bit later, so I'm just going to do this on my own instead of having Rob and Callum join me for this. But in the future, we'll probably get their opinions about some of these topics, no matter what, because some of them are going to carry over anyway. But I always want to know what you have to say, though, and as I always mention on this podcast, there are plenty of different ways for you to chime in with your thoughts. Now, if you're listening to us on some kind of non-comment type of platform like Amazon Music or Spotify. Actually, Spotify, you can do that. I always forget about that. You can leave a comment there. But, Apple Podcasts or whatever it might be, then head on over to one of the other options that we have out there. Post on something on smarkoutmoment.com on the page that this is up under. Go to Facebook, go to Twitter. Check out the Discord server that we have over at the link that you can see on your screen or the link that's on the sidebar of smarkoutmoment.com. Chat it up during the week at any kind of random time for any kind of random topics. We also have some stuff on the Fanboys Anonymous spectrum on there too, if you want to talk about video games. Or, I recently was just talking about that I saw Megan 2.0. So, I brought that up under the movie Slack channel and not Slack channel, Discord channel. Slack's a different whole thing. But the Discord side of things, great place for you to chime in with your thoughts about stuff and all that. But if you are on YouTube and you can hit up the comments section, that's even better. Well, you should do both. But that is great for making sure that you specifically have the tie-in for this podcast and this kind of conversation out of context and all. If you are over there on YouTube, though, make sure that you also hit the like button, subscribe, ring that notification bell, get your email alerts set up for when we go live for things like the post show, which is going to be immediately following the Night of Champions pay-per-view tomorrow. Keep in mind, of course, Night of Champions is happening tomorrow afternoon. The pre-show is at 11 a.m. Eastern time, and then the card itself starts at, I believe, 1 o'clock. I think it's a 2-hour pre-show. A 2-hour pre-show that'll be completely pointless, so don't bother watching it. I'm unfortunately going to have to, but that's where you check in with me, and then I tell you if you missed anything. It's kind of the whole point of my job. And keep in mind as well, click on the join button, share your support through the thanks button, or that any kind of monetary donations that you do are greatly, greatly appreciated. They really do help out quite a bit. Even if it's $1 a month, you have no idea how much it does help, and especially the more that people do that. So if you're the type of person who's like, I can't really donate $5 a month, but there's a whole bunch of you, that adds up. So I really appreciate that. But if you are on the Darkcast tier, you get some special episodes you can only get on there. Pick your poison. You get to request things and actually fund them directly. So if you're like, hey, these guys haven't done a top rope list in a while, and this is the topic I want them to do, well, you're paying for it. So you're going to get it. Within reason, of course, they're not going to get some kind of do a fan ounce table of every single WrestleMania of all time. That's not happening. We're not watching every single thing like that for one donation for that. But you know what I mean. So look back on previous Pick Your Poison episodes and stuff. You've got an idea about like fan tracks that we do for Fanboys Anonymous, or Mount Rushmores that we've done, and so on and so forth. Also pick up some merchandise from Redbubble and TeePublic. I'm going to try to get some more merchandise ideas out there in the future. I don't really know exactly what yet, but if you have any suggestions, drop them in the comments below too. Now let's get into these hot tags. So I still have all my same notes as what I had before. Again, I'm going to try to get Rob's opinions and Callum's opinions about this down the line. Maybe if they are on the podcast tomorrow, we'll talk about some of these things. But if not, we might roll it into some hot tags next week, or some of them, I'm sure that they don't really have a whole lot of opinions about one way or another. So it is what it is when it comes to that. So I'm going to go in just like a pretty random order here because I didn't bother to set things up ahead of time, but I'll try to keep at least the TV stuff grouped together a little bit. WWE has trademarked 2 things, at the very least, that we know what the trademarks are. Of course, it's hard to track the trademarks these days because it's not as easily found on, the trademark trackers that we used to keep track of. But 2 of those trademarks are the Oracle and WWE Late Night. The Oracle, we know, is a new nickname for Paul Heyman because he was the advocate for Brock Lesnar, and then he was the wise man for the tribal chief, Roman Reigns. And they can't really do either of those for Seth Rollins and company. So he's going to be called the Oracle. Now, again, I'm going to repeat something I've said, I don't know how many times by now. This faction needs a name. I am sick and tired of typing out Seth Rollins, Paul Heyman, Braun Breaker, and Big Bronson Reed every single time they do anything. And if you're going to call Paul Heyman the Oracle and Seth Rollins is the Visionary, they really should go with something similar to, the Vision or whatever like that. I don't really have any suggestions off the top of my head, partially because I'm brain dead from not sleeping, but also because I didn't bother to set that up ahead of time. But I wouldn't really love the name The Vision. I think that's a little bit bland. I tend to like names that I feel aren't something that everybody else would just copy. Like, I liked the name Degeneration X and the Heart Foundation and the Nation of Domination more than I liked Demolition or, say, The Shield. Like, I didn't really love that name either, I think that a lot of these names that they come up with for factions in WWE are pretty lame. We now know also as well, by the way, that Adrenaline Drip is the tag team name of Cappuccino Jones and Jack Cartwheel. So I guess the drip part is for the cappuccino, it's like the coffee drip, and the adrenaline part is Jack Cartwheel. But in any fashion, it is what it is. WWE Late Night is unfortunately going to be a show hosted by Tony Hinchcliffe, the racist comedian that wasn't funny in his WWE, was it WWE After Dark or WWE, the roast of WrestleMania. That's what it was. I listened to that entire show. He was not funny. So I'm assuming that he is not going to be funny here either. Yet the company, of course, wants to dig their heels deeper into these terrible politics that will not age well. Eventually, the right side of history will look at these people in the wrong way. Look at what happened in Germany. And they're going to be embarrassed for this. But in the meantime, they're an evil corporation that is supporting an evil regime in, this kind of side of politics right now. So they're going to do that kind of stuff, and then they're going to walk it back later and try to say that they didn't do it. So I will, of course, not be supporting this WWE Late Night thing. It's hard enough to support some WWE things as it is already with all the people that are, what they are. But this in particular is just another thing where it's like, okay, well, I don't have to watch this, so I'm not going to. And I advise everybody else to bombard things and talk about how much they hate it too, because the only way that WWE listens is if you vote with your wallets and if you vote with your voices. So, big old thumbs up to the Oracle nickname and a big old middle finger to Tony Hinchcliffe. Let's get into another big old middle finger. Hulk Hogan wants to open up the Slam, that's going to be the name, bar across from Madison Square Garden. Now, I am, I said before, a bunch of years ago, I moved to New York. I live within a 20-minute walk of Madison Square Garden. So I don't go there all the time. Of course, why am I going to Madison Square Garden specifically? But yeah, it's Penn Station, and it is what it is when it comes to just, you pass by certain things when you're walking certain places and all. So to me, if this were something that wasn't Hulk Hogan based, and I'm also not a drinker either, I do not drink. So the idea about going to a bar also doesn't appeal to me on that front. But if they had like good food and stuff, then I would, I'd consider it. And it's a pro wrestling thing, so I would consider it too. But knowing that it's a Hulk Hogan thing, I'm absolutely not going to be going to this thing. So the details about that, for anybody that would be interested in it, it's going to be a $7 million, 9,000 square foot space that they want to try to set up in the fall. I hope it goes under. I hope they lose a lot of money for this. And I hope everybody gets what's coming to them when karma rolls back around. It's pretty obvious where I stand on that front. And I've said plenty of times, if you disagree with that, I don't need you to even leave a comment below. I just need you to leave. I mostly have everything else tied into TV talk. I don't know if I'm missing other topics. This is normally where, maybe Callum would say, like, here's the thing that happened in New Japan, or Rob would be like, remember that this story happened, or whatever like that. But it is what it is. I'm sure if they are really, really important, then we'll somehow come back around to them. But I looked at the rundown of some different news things that I've written up this week and other people have written up, and a lot of it's just stuff that we've already covered for King and Queen of the Ring, or it's stuff that we've, covered, like SmackDown's going back to 2 hours next week, thank God. And we already talked about that, so no point in really getting into it. But let's get into this random thing about AEW. Supposedly, now I don't know if there's really a whole lot that like confirms this in any kind of direction whatsoever, but I got to assume that it probably is true, and where there's smoke there's fire. Supposedly WWE, AEW and Tony Khan have had 2 different sets of tag team titles that are just sitting on the shelf right now that he had created, and I see every reason why they didn't bother to actually execute the plan to make these titles a thing, because those are the AEW Women's World Tag Team Championships, which I think realistically at this point you probably could pull off. You got Mega Bad, you've got TJ and the Vendetta, and I'm blanking on a lot of the other names right now, but there's plenty. The Renegades are another one. Even when you get to like Tony Storm and Mina Shirakawa or something like that, you can team people up. Athena's got her crew. Yeah, you got enough tag teams that you could do that. So now, if they were to pull that off, I think that they could do it. But the other one is the AEW Intergenerational Tag Team Championship, which would essentially apply to father and son duos, whether real or fake, and then they would have to expand it beyond that. Because look at it this way. If this would have been created just to give a belt on a tag team side of things to Christian and Nick Wayne for the whole father and son patriarchy thing, and that's it, then why would they need it? And I saw on the other thing saying like that this could apply to, say, Billy Gunn and Anthony Bowens. Now, of course, they are not a father and son duo, but that becomes that whole, okay, well, now it's intergenerational. It's not father and son. It's just one generation of wrestlers and another generation of wrestlers. Okay, so now the thing expands beyond what it is, and it's taking on a whole new form. Even that, I think, is still not something that is worthwhile, because how many people are going to be intergenerational in a way that they can sustain a championship run, be hired to the company, be interesting enough, and have enough other people that they could fight with? Because let's say you put Christian and Nick Wayne as the champions, and they go up against Bowens and Billy Gunn. You've got Dustin Rhodes and Sammy Guevara, sure. Who else? You can't build a division around 3 people. In this case, 6 because it's a tag team, but you know what I mean. It's 3 teams. That's not something that you can do. And I don't see any value in WWE. I keep wanting to say WWE because I have a WWE logo up on my screen right now. I can't see any value in Tony Khan being like, okay, well, then I just need to sign a bunch of older talent. Why? Is that really going to draw? Is that really going to be a thing that people are really all that interested in, to see one half of the Rock and Roll Express and their kid? Sting's not going to come back and wrestle with his kids. He already retired. And you're not going to bring in people that can't wrestle anymore and have them be, incapable of being in the ring, and then their son or their, whoever their tag team partner is, they're not related to, does all the work. And then that defeats the purpose too, because they're supposed to have the two of them. It's a tag team thing. So I think that this is a case where Tony Khan just had an idea and he started to run with it before really thinking. And then once you spent the money on this belt being created, I'm curious what it looks like. Then he probably realized, you know what, there actually isn't anything to this, and I probably shouldn't do it. And then here's where I suggest something, and I put this on my AWN question of the day when it comes to just suggesting, hey, is this an idea that you like or not? Or, disagree with me all you want. Wouldn't this make more sense as a trophy and like a little tournament or something? If you could bring in enough people and do something along those lines, make it a temporary thing, make it a trophy. Whoever wins gets also a title shot at the regular tag titles, and essentially treat it as if it's another one of the Owen Hart Cup type things. So whether you have like Jeff Jarrett and a protege, I don't know who it would be. Let's just say it's Jeff Jarrett and Hangman Page. I don't know. It wouldn't make any sense, but still. They win this intergenerational cup, and then they get a shot at the tag team titles. You can either have them lose that title shot, and then it's like, well, they won the cup and that's really cool for them, but then they lost the tag titles because they weren't really going to be holding that belt for all that long. Or if you really, really like that team, you can have them win the tag titles, and there's nothing stopping an intergenerational team from just being the tag team champions. You want proof of that? Sammy Guevara and Dustin Rhodes, they're already doing it. So I don't see any reason for this whatsoever. I think this is a terrible idea. The women's tag titles, I think that they can actually do that. I don't think I would necessarily say that they should, but they could have that be viable, at least in some ways. I think, if anything, the thing that AEW really should do right now, if they wanted to create another belt, instead of, this whole unified thing, which has a stupid name, I think that they would be much better off if they created either a specialized hardcore championship or a specialized cruiserweight championship. That way you've got people that are, specializing in a certain type of extra field, and it's something a little bit different. It's not really a lot different when it comes to that they have hardcore matches elsewhere, and, it's like, that's not going to stop Jon Moxley from still be leading in every single one of his matches. Or, the cruiserweights, we're still going to get people flipping around and doing everything that they do. Just because Kevin Knight is not the cruiserweight champion doesn't mean he's not going to still do that. Or Leo Rush is not still going to do that in his matches. But then again, that never stopped WWE from having the cruiserweight championship or the hardcore title do the same thing either. And it still worked, and they were still fun. I think if you wanted to give a spotlight to another person on the roster, something like that is a means to give a different person with a different type of presentation a spotlight. And you could take a guy like a Mark Briscoe. Maybe they want to give him another title down the line. Maybe he wins the TNT title or whatever it might be. But maybe you make him the hardcore champion. And then maybe that's his niche that he ends up having a lot of fun with. Maybe you take a guy like an Action Andretti, and he's not somebody that you really want to invest and put the mid-card title on, or even a tag title or a trios title. But maybe you want to give him the cruiserweight, and then you can have that be something on the pre-show. I think that those things could work, and I would be much more pitching that than the women's tag titles, or especially the intergenerational titles. I don't see any point in that at all. After those topics are out of the way, now I'm definitely on the just let's run down the TV stuff and then talk about the things that happened during. And then a lot of the stuff on Raw we already talked about in our preview of the Night of Champions stuff. So, Jade Cargill beating Roxanne Perez to advance in the semifinals of the Queen of the Ring tournament, and the idea of the Karrion Kross and Sami Zayn match, and all of the things that they did on there. As far as things that they had on Raw that they didn't incorporate, that we didn't talk about or whatever. We did already mention that Chad Gable is injured and that Dominik Mysterio is injured and that LA Knight is injured, but I guess we didn't talk about it too much. Now we know at least what the situation is for those. The LA Knight one might not be a real injury. It might be a storyline thing. Chad Gable has something going on with his arm, so they specifically targeted the arm and all that. So El Grande Americano not going to be wrestling for a little while, which as far as I'm aware, he's still the Speed champion. So I don't know what they do when it comes to setting up that. And then Dominik Mysterio is dealing with some kind of a ribs issue. And I don't mean, baby back ribs. Man, that sounds actually pretty fucking good right now. I haven't eaten anything in well over 24 hours. Wait, that's not the right math. Well over, I don't know. I'm too brain dead at this point. 18 hours or something along those lines. Anyway, I want some ribs is what I'm saying. Some, some barbecue sauce, and then that'd be pretty great. Throw in some chicken tendies, hook up some of those too. But the Dom thing, we were talking about the idea that it was potentially that he didn't want to travel over to Saudi Arabia. Doesn't seem like that is the case. I still think it was a viable theory at the time. Now we know that that isn't. So we were wrong. And that sucks that he's injured. Hopefully he is cleared to compete very soon and continues this Intercontinental title reign and all. The other stuff that happened on Raw was mostly all tied to the Money in the Bank, or not Money in the Bank. God, totally brain dead. Night of Champions things. Becky Lynch retained the Intercontinental Championship on the women's division by DQ, setting up a whole thing with Lyra Valkyria. So I think even more so, that does seem to be pushing towards that whole triple threat thing going on for Evolution. And, there's no real better option that they could go with right now for that. So that makes perfect sense. On the NXT side of things, TNA World Championship match, Trick Williams retains, to no surprise, over Josh Briggs. Then they've got George Gums Jr. and Tyreek Sapp, two people that I don't know, two athletes. I'm assuming that they're football players or basketball players. I wasn't really paying enough attention, but Miles Bourne was talking to him. Lexis King goes over and starts making fun of Miles Bourne being partially deaf, so that sets up a match for next week. Javon Evans beats Tavion Heights by pinfall. Heights was also apparently injured in some fashion with his nose or something. A lot of nose injuries happening in NXT lately. This is the third one in the past couple of months or so. It was JC and Jasmine Nix and now Tavion, and I don't know what's happening there, but at least it's better to be able to wrestle and wear a protective face mask than that tear your ACL. So let's not go back to that. But the stipulation for the match was Tavion Heights could get out of No Quarter Catch Crew if he won, which he didn't. And then Jasper Troy beat up Javon Evans afterward. So, he still has an axe to grind on there. Ricky Saints beats Ashanti the Adonis. And I made a point to get my wife to watch at the time because she cringes at a lot of different things. And I was like, oh, you haven't seen Ashanti's. First off, you haven't seen much of Ashanti the Adonis as it is. So the name alone was already ew, 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 ew. And then when he was doing his entrance, she was just like, oh, I don't like this. I don't like this. Oh, I love that woman so much. Ricky Saints beats him. Ethan Page attacks him after the match. And then Ava later on is like, you two need to settle this, which I'm pretty sure that she said 3 or 4 times before. So I don't know why this threats even more, but they are going to be in her office next week. By the way, Hank Walker and Tank Ledger got attacked. I'm assuming that it is by Dark State, but man, that performance center is the safe haven for being attacked. If you want to get your ass beat backstage or in a parking lot, you just go to NXT and somebody's going to attack you at some point. Safe haven is not the right word for that. It's the opposite of a safe haven. But man, Dark State, if they didn't attack Hank and Tank, that's even worse because they just have been doing fuck all lately. To the point that they decided that they needed to add a little vignette this week where it was essentially, hey, we haven't done anything in a while, but remember that we're Dark State and we still are here. Very, very lame. Obafemi came out, asked for somebody to challenge him, and Yoshiki Inamura came out based off of what he had said last week, where he had said, yeah, I kind of just got my TNA World title shot, but I'm going to give it to Josh Briggs because I want the NXT title instead. He gets attacked by Jasper Troy, and that sets up a match for next week, which I will get into the spoilers for in a moment, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a warning when it comes to that. Channing Stacks Lorenzo beat Tony D'Angelo to win the NXT Heritage Cup. Now, the setup behind this was barely there. They had announced last week that since Stacks had beaten Tony D at Battleground, and since Tony D was a former Heritage Cup champion, that meant that Stacks was somehow in line for a title shot against a champion that hadn't been there in a while, because Noam Dar was injured for a long time, for well over a year. Pretty sure it was well over a year. It might have been just slightly under a year. It might have been like May to April or something that he returned. But for a year, let's just put it that way, he was injured. And he came back, won the Heritage Cup. The next week, they have a thing with Metaphor, and it's like, hey, remember that we were a group? Well, we should split up, and two of you should be fired, and then I'll go fuck off for a while and not do anything. So I don't know if he wasn't around because he was already injured, and he pretty much got injured right out of the gate, and it just became a situation where they were like, okay, well, what do we got to do? We got to figure something else out here, and we'll just wait and see how bad the injury is or anything along those lines. But whatever it ended up being, he is injured, and he had to vacate the championship. So it turned into who's Stack going to fight. Stacks goes up against Tony D, and it's essentially the best case scenario, I think, of what could have happened, at least when it comes to at least Stacks is, doing something with Tony D. But I hate what happened here because they decided to just half-ass it again. They didn't actually tell the next phase of the story, and I loathe when WWE does this because it is not proper storytelling, and it is, not even when it comes to like proper storytelling, it's not good storytelling. Even if you can, let's put it this way, you can say you're telling a proper story and it doesn't necessarily, it's good. Like a logical progression of story doesn't necessarily mean entertaining. And an entertaining story doesn't necessarily have to have a logical progression. It can go in some twists and turns and everything. This is neither of it. What's been happening in this feud? Tony D was attacked by Stacks. Adriana Rizzo is just gone, but everybody knows where she is, so she's in hiding in plain sight, which is stupid. And Luca keeps saying, hey, you can trust me, but I'm going to completely lose my fucking sensibilities and act like somebody who is untrustworthy, which essentially boils down to two potential options. Luca cannot be trusted, and he's just mucking around. I don't know why, but he's doing it for that reason. Or Luca can be trusted, and he's lost all his fucking brain cells. He's a goddamn idiot. Neither story is being told well, and they had the perfect opportunity here to actually progress the story. And by doing something like Luca decides that he is going to just hit Tony D'Angelo and allow Stacks to win a championship and help him out because he's on his side. Or better yet, I was hoping you throw Adriana Rizzo back in there, and then they do something with either she turns on Tony D and Luca actually was on his side, or Luca is on Stacks' side, but Rizzo comes out and helps, or they both turn on Tony D. Any of those would have been something. Instead, what happens here is Luca acts like a goddamn idiot again, and then he accidentally hits Tony D with that bucket that's ringside. So now Tony D is like, I can't trust you, and I can't trust you, and he points to Stacks. Of course you can't trust Stacks. The motherfucker attacked you. You've been feuding with him for like 2 months. It's so poorly written, and it's the type of thing that I look at and I just go, not to toot my own horn, but goddamn WWE, hire me, and I'll at least be able to point out the poor storytelling that you're doing and be able to toss out some alternatives, because to me, there are so many ways you could take this story. And they're quite literally not going in any of those directions. They are just sticking around the same plot point and hovering it for weeks and weeks. And in some reason, for some, backwards ass mentality that they have, they seem to think if you repeat a story beat over and over and over again, that's the same as telling a long story. Imagine watching a movie where that just happens, where the movie starts off and it's like, I have to go find the Fountain of Youth. And I found it, but I lost the map. Okay, well, now I gotta go find the map. And I grabbed the map, but then it blew away. So I went and chased after the map, and then it blew away. And then I chased after the map, and it blew away. And then I chased after the map, and it blew away. You're not even doing anything different to stall the one thing that needs to happen. And you're going to be bored out of your fucking mind. So I'm bored out of my skull when it comes to thinking this is just not at all what they should be doing. So boo on that. Boo on the Chase U story as well, because again, you can't just repeat the same exact thing and think that that's progressing the story. What happened last week? Kel Dixon looks like an idiot, and Andre Chase says, suck it up, and you need to adapt to Chase U. Chase U does not adapt to you. And Dixon and Uriah Connors get upset and they storm out of the classroom. So what happens this week? Kel Dixon looks upset. Andre Chase says, I'm not even exaggerating this, what I said last week is something that I still believe in. He said it in other words, but just remember what I said last week? That again. And then Dixon and Uriah Connors go, oh man. And then they storm out. It's the same exact thing, except done even worse than the previous week. And people get paid to write this. I have done more work laying in bed half asleep, trying to sleep, working on my random notes about my Power Rangers blueprint earlier today for 6 minutes than they've done for the entirety of writing these past 3 episodes of NXT. And it might sound harsh, maybe if you're a WWE creative person right now and you're saying, I'm listening to this podcast and it's like, oh, this fucker thinks he can do my job better than me. Yes, I do. I am very confident in that. And if the reason why you can't write is because WWE is shackling you and they're saying we don't have any stories for you to do and you should just do this, then you're not able to write and it's not your fault. So then you can't be blamed for not writing. I understand. However, then the blame shifts to WWE. Why are you hiring writers that you do not let write? In one way or another, WWE is at fault for not hiring better writers or allowing writers to write. Buck stops somewhere, and that's WWE creative. So that was a disappointment, again, to just do that. And that takes us into the spoilers for next week. Now, the setup for that, of course, if you don't want to know what the spoilers are, then you can skip forward a little bit. I'm not going to timestamp this, but I don't know. It is what it is. So, I guess if you, what I'll do, on the YouTube side of things, I will flash the Darkcast thing or something. You'll see the graphic change or something when I'm done with this. There you go. And I'll do that for like a split second and we'll switch it around. So here are the spoilers for next week's NXT. Miles Bourne beats Lexis King. Laney Reed beats Thea Hale. Joe Hendry beats Wes Lee. Izzy Dame and Tatum Paxley beat Sol Ruka and Zarya. And Yoshiki Inamura beats Jasper Troy to become the number 1 contender for the title match for Obafemi's title defense at Great American Bash. There you go. Now we are done with those. Yeah, there you go. It's really nothing. So Watch that next week if you want to. You don't have to anymore. I saved you the effort. I'm going to save myself the effort of that and not watch it next week, probably. Which then takes us into the AEW Dynamite and Collision content for this week. Mercedes Moné attacks Tony Storm. Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland beat Billy Christian and Lee Johnson and then challenge the Young Bucks to a match at All In, with the stipulation being that if the Young Bucks lose, they give their EVP status to Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland. I am, of course, hoping that that is the case. I think that that's the more interesting story than if it just stays exactly the status quo. But we'll see about that. Kota Ibushi made his in-ring return, beat Trent Beretta. Nice to see Kota Ibushi back. There was a little backstage thing with AR Fox and Ricochet. It was kind of funny, where Ricochet was saying that AR Fox should be his tag team partner, and he has everything that he could potentially use in a crew member. AR Fox did not necessarily agree to it, but ended up wrestling the match. Then Ricochet ended up leaving him behind, and then AR Fox loses to Jet Speed. Jet Speed are going to be fighting the Hurt Syndicate at All In for the WWE. I keep wanting to call it WWE. I got to get that WWE logo off my screen. For the AEW World Tag Team Championship, led to a segment where Mark Briscoe made fun of MGF's kosher pickle in his pants, which I guess we should update everybody. Alicia Toot said is not a small kosher pickle. So, I'm not a pickle guy in more ways than one. I don't like anything that it's pickled. And I certainly would not like anything that would be pickled in MJF's pants. But more power to you if you are. There was a 4-way for the number 1 spots in the men's and the women's casino gauntlet matches. Briscoe comes out on top of his match. Chris Statlander wins hers. So they will start off the casino gauntlets that will take place at All In. Again, the winner of the gauntlets always get a world championship shot at some kind of future show. Doesn't really specify exactly when. It could be at the next pay-per-view. It could be at the next special episode of Dynamite. It could be just a random episode of Collision or something along those lines. But I do not think that Chris Statlander is going to win, even though we don't even know the full span of the people that are going to be in these matches. And I don't think that Mark Briscoe is going to win either. Now, even just going by the group of people that are in these that we know, like Athena, Chris Statlander, Thunder Rosa, and Willow Nightingale, Bandito, Konosuke Takeshita, Mark Briscoe, and Roderick Strong, I would lean more towards, if Jon Moxley is going to be retaining the championship, then yeah, there is a chance that Mark Briscoe wins, but I think that somebody else is going to be in the mix for this and they are going to win instead. And then I think that when it comes to Mercedes Moné, I think she is going to beat Timeless Tony Storm, and Chris Statlander, again, could win, but I think that it's actually going to be Athena who wins that. That way you can set up yet another championship belt that Mercedes is going to try to win. They also had Hangman Page beats Beast Mortos, whole big bunch of people at the end brawling and doing that whole shtick. And then the Collision side of things, nothing that really stood out to me as anything all that important. I did not watch Collision, to be perfectly honest. I felt, I did the spoilers breakdown and I thought that was good enough. And by reading that, I was fine. So that ended up being, TNT title match. Adam Cole retains over Josh Alexander. Queen Aminata gets win over Sky Blue and beaten up a little bit afterward. Fletcher beats O'Reilly in a match of Kyle versus Kyle. Things like that. Again, it's not really worth it to break down. They're just matches that happen. Then we got to balance out the scale to go back to WWE so I can stop saying AEW, WWE instead of AEW. Now I'm doing the opposite. Oh my God, the whole point of that semi-joke right then was supposed to be ragging on myself, and then I make the same mistake. So SmackDown, again, the reason why we're doing the hot tags the way that we're doing it now, we're doing it a little bit later and I'm doing it by myself. It's because I didn't know that it was going to be at 1 p.m. until, a couple hours right beforehand. And boy, was I annoyed when I was like, okay, I guess I'm only getting a half hour sleep. Let me make sure that I'm all ready to go. And for the show to start off with 30 minutes of technical difficulties, I could have gotten an extra 30 minutes of sleep if I would have known that. So everybody missed out on the Randy Orton and Cody Rhodes promo. I obviously do not think that I missed out on much, because I'm sure that this promo was Cody Rhodes saying, I respect you, you are a mentor for me, and I'm still going to win at King of the Ring. And Randy Orton saying, you're great, love you like a brother, but I'm going to win at King of the Ring. Basically the same thing that they did before. I highly doubt that anything else happened, especially because nobody else was talking about anything that would have happened afterward anyway. And if something would have gone down that would have been interesting during the show in the arena, even without having the feed on, I'm sure that we would have found out at some point. So supposedly there was a power loss in Riyadh, and that screwed everything up. And that's, it's not Netflix's fault, because they can't do anything with a feed that doesn't exist. So it's technically not necessarily WWE's fault. It's just one of those things that happens. And it's a shame that it didn't happen before the show started. But at least it happened here, because the opening promos that take up 15, 20, 30 something minutes at the start of every single show are effectively almost always pointless. They either set up something later on in the show that did not need to be set up in that long-winded of a fashion. Like, hey, how about these two people argue, and then we have a tag team match. Whoa. All right, Teddy Long. Or it's something where they just repeat and it leads nowhere. So I'm actually kind of glad that I missed it, but I wish I wouldn't have had to sit through 30 minutes of We'll Be Right Back with that same bong, 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 bong kind of music. I don't want to ever hear that again. After that, though, we had Giulia win the Women's United States Championship from Zelina Vega. This is not at all surprising. This is something that was being forecast so much. They clearly did not have any interest in actually pushing Zelina Vega. They put the belt on her as a transitional reign. She was given nothing to do with this championship, even to the point that when they finally set up, what was it, like 2 weeks later or something, that they were just like, all right, we're just going to go with Giulia. Like, she's most likely going to challenge her next, and it's pretty obvious we're going in that direction. They didn't even bother to set up the match. It was like, I want a match, or I want a confrontation with Giulia, and then I don't get it. So then I wasn't even that. It was like, she was supposed to like have a match, I think. And then it changed to her backstage, Vega backstage, being like, I want to confront her next week. And then that led to, well, then you're not even going to do that. We're just going to announce that you guys have a match. The match wasn't really all that great. And it's just a transparent example of WWE being like, can we put the belt on somebody that can take it from Chelsea and then lose it to Giulia? Well, Zelina's here. She's been around for a while. Let's give her this tip of the cap for, ironically, 63 days, which is the same amount of time that Giulia held the NXT Women's Championship before she ended up losing that to Stephanie Vaquer. So that's a little bit weird. Or should I say Stephanie Vaquer. And the whole transition to Giulia is just, they didn't care about Zelina Vega. So I feel really bad for her. I think that sucks that they continuously overlook her and devalue her. I know that she's passionate about it, and if she's getting paid and she's enjoying what she's doing and stuff, then it's what it is, and she can keep doing that job as long as she wants. I don't want to see her go, but at the same time, if I'm Zelina Vega, at a certain point, I want to stop taking bumps for a company that doesn't value me. Maybe start doing some other stuff. Maybe focus on my Twitch. Maybe do some non-pro wrestling things. I don't know. I don't think that she would really be a good fit for AEW. I don't think that they would push her more than what WWE is doing. I don't know if she would necessarily even want to go there based off of Aleister Black being there, him wanting to leave. And there isn't really a better option for her to do anything else elsewhere, like to go to TNA and somehow make more money and be a bigger star or anything along those lines. But man, That sucks. It sucks when you see somebody that's talented and deserves better perpetually be told no for seemingly no reason as well. So I hope that something happens down the line where she can, bounce back from this. But that's not to say that Giulia is a bad option. Giulia didn't get a chance to really be NXT Women's Champion, so I understand why they went in this direction. I just wish that they would have actually given Zelina something of a title reign and not made it so abundantly clear that they couldn't give a shit about her. Now, I had pre-written up the potential of 2 other title changes on SmackDown. We talked about this before, but they didn't happen. Wyatt Six ended up in the same situation that I had mentioned, where that all the other tag teams got involved and it was a no contest. And even though Naomi came out and tried to cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase on the last one standing match, didn't work out for her. So that was just a tease for really no reason other than, just to put a tease out there. So that element of SmackDown is just, it was kind of just, killing time and giving title matches for the sake of title matches and all, but it didn't really progress much forward. Aleister Black seems like he's going to be in a feud with R-Truth and Damian Priest going forward. It seems like Carmelo Hayes is partially in the mix for that too. Not sure why The Miz wasn't there, but I guess maybe they just decided, well, we don't really necessarily need you. But then again, why would they need Carmelo either? Like for him to pop up and just say, you should mind your own business. So not a great episode of SmackDown, but they pushed some stories forward. Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair had a little backstage thing talking about how they don't need to be friends. But Bliss suggested that it be mutually beneficial if they're on the same page. Jimmy Uso and Jacob Fatu are on the same page now. Andrade and Rey Fenix at least tentatively have a little tag team thing going on. B-Fab is possibly back with the Street Profits. I don't know about that. And the other thing that people would be talking about is that based off of John Cena doing the pipe bomb thing with CM Punk last week, the opposite happened here. CM Punk did the Doctor of Thugonomics thing, ripping off John Cena's old gimmick. It was okay. He stumbled a little bit. Everybody stammers. You hear me do this on this podcast all the time, so you can't really talk about that and, not point at yourself a little bit too, but when you're doing something like this, that does downgrade it a little bit here and there. And some of the lines I didn't think were particularly great zingers, but overall, it's a fun enough concept. A lot of people seem to enjoy it. So, it's a success more than it's a failure. And that's going to do me in for this episode. Now, we are, of course, going to be back next day. Why am I going to phrase it that way? See the stammering and stuff? It happens. It happens to the best of us and the worst of us. I'm the worst of us. Tomorrow, I will be back for the Night of Champions pay-per-view point post-show immediately following the pay-per-view. I'm assuming that is going to be sometime around 4 or 5 o'clock, since that 1 o'clock start time will probably carry a 3-hour show. It'll be 4 o'clock when they're over with. But whenever it is, you will know if you have your email alerts set up. If you don't have your email alerts set up, then you won't get alerted by email, because that's the point. So you're just going to have to tune in. But that's going to be where you see me next. Now, keep in mind, share your support on all the different platforms that I mentioned before with this marketplace stuff, Redbubble, TeePublic, Patreon, the YouTube channel membership, and the thanks button. Join that Discord server that I mentioned before as well. And go to amangotree.com to see a link list of a bunch of different social media accounts and different places that you can find me, and you can follow me on those kind of things. And I guess stay tuned for some more updates on the Fantasy League as well, depending on what we end up having go on tomorrow. But yeah, that's it. So adios for now, everybody. This has been another Smark Out moment, and I'm being counted out.